And I'd like to formally introduce our dear guest speaker from Hawaii, island Oahu, is Florian Sydow. And Florian serves for decades as chair of the Anthroposophical Society in Hawaii. He is co-founder Kahumana Farm and Community on the island of Oahu. And he's been a major key designer and architect, organic architect of such community. So dear friends, welcome. This is part 10 of Apocalyptic serial by Florian. Dear Florian, if you are ready, it's over to you.
Yes, thank you, Andre, and also the Chicago branch for hosting these events. And I think people in this particular period we're living in can sense that there are some powerful chaotic forces at work in our present civilization that we have to meet ourselves, but also help to prepare young incarnating souls to meet these challenges that lie ahead. And I think the book of Revelation provides some important key insights into the present unfolding of evolution in our time, so that with the help of spiritual science, we can penetrate these mysteries that this last book of the Bible poses in its language of symbols, which are really in the astral world. And you also then have the heavenly, the deviconic world, the world of tones coming in with the trumpets. And of course, the voice that speaks to John. And so I think this is sort of very much speaking to our time. Rudolf Steiner, on several occasions, indicated this is much of what was prophetically expressed in the book of Revelation. Some of the key themes are unfolding in this consciousness soul period that began in 1413. So let me share the screen. So I wanted to start with entering once again into some words that Steiner spoke of regarding this book of Revelation. And one of the things you'll notice is when you look at these seals, that especially the blue and the red play an important role. And this has to do with the two pillars that we see in the fourth seal, one having to do with the incarnating, the red pillar, and the other with the blue pillar. This is related to the red and the blue blood, the inbreathing and the outbreathing. And the outbreathing carries the word, which can be raised to the level of the micro logos through making a place in our hearts and minds for the macrocosmic logos who appeared at the turning point of time. So here, Steiner was speaking back in 1924 to begin with. This indeed is the time of great decision, the great crisis to which the sacred books of all times have referred, for in reality, the present age is meant. One such sacred book, said to be sealed with 7 seals, of the Book of Revelation, authored by the beloved disciple, sometimes referred to as John the Divine. Rudolf Steiner differentiated between the more exoteric content of the Gospels, the good tidings announced to all the world, and the more profound esoteric teachings contained in the Apocalypse in the form of symbols. He went on to say that there was a Rosicrucian way of reading the Apocalypse, which only now could be made public. It was during the following year that Rudolf Steiner first made public the 7 seals and columns as a decorative motif, and at the 1907 Munich Congress that was held around the time of Whitsun, the Pentecost season. Among the very last lectures Rudolf Steiner delivered before his illness was a series of 18 lectures on the Book of Revelation and the work of the priest. He indicated that, quote, that all those who have taken the Book of Revelation into their eye and astral body with inner understanding have gradually been enshrining it in the ether of the earth's aura, so that now the presence of Christ working on in the earth's aura provides this aura of the earth with its fundamental keynote. The Revelation, the book, the Apocalyptic book, and thus contains the beginning of an initiation for Christendom. This revelation is a kind of early stage of an initiation, not for the individuals, but for the whole of Christendom. During the course of these talks, he also provided his listeners with a new consciousness soul interpretation of the Book of Revelation, which is very relevant to the times we are facing. According to this interpretation, from 1840 to the turn of the millennium, the 6th trumpet would be sounding. And as humanity crossed over into the new millennium, the 7th trumpet would begin to sound. So I've in the past showed the contrast between this interpretation that he speaks of here for the consciousness soul and the other cycles that, for example, the one in, I think, 1908 in Nuremberg, the 7th trumpet in that time frame given during that lecture course on the Apocalypse places the 7th trumpet at the very end of Earth evolution. And the transition to the pralaya state between the Earth evolution and the future Jupiter stage, or what's called the New Jerusalem, the Golden City in the Book of Revelation. So it's important to experience how, on the one hand, we have this very large unfolding of historical evolution, and like often happens in classical music, where leading over to the larger theme of the music, you have preludes. And I would suggest that one could see this consciousness soul version that places the sixth and seventh trumpet between the 1840s and with the sounding of the sixth trumpet and the seventh in the beginning of our new millennium that we crossed over into 25 years ago as such a prelude. Now, I wanted to focus in on this importance of the turning point of time, which Rudolf Steiner often indicated was really the pivotal event of Earth evolution. And one of the ways to understand that is given in Steiner's overview of anthroposophy in Esoteric Science and Outline, or Occult Science and Outline, where he sought to give a comprehensive view. And interestingly, during the latter part of that book, he speaks of spiritual science as a grail science. And the whole grail theme goes back to Joseph of Arimathea, at least in its post-Christian version. And he then was the individual who presided over the upper room where the Last Supper took place. And he had access to the cup that was used at the Last Supper and brought it with him to the mound where the mystery of Golgotha on Good Friday, we remember the event. And he, together with Nicodemus, were very much involved in taking this body down from the cross, this sacred vessel. The Jesus being can be seen as the archetypal grail vessel. And secondarily, Joseph of Arimathea gathered this precious blood into this vessel. And of course, the blood was also flowing into the earth itself. And there's deep mysteries connected with this that one can enter into through Steiner's lecture on the etherization of the blood. So in this larger sequence of evolution that Steiner goes through in Esoteric Science and Outline and many other places, it for human beings, it begins with old Saturn, where the thrones, which are the third member of the first hierarchy of seraphim, cherubim, and thrones, who mediate the impulse of the father, mother ground of the universe, and sort of stand behind the zodiac and the world of the stars. But the thrones then made a certain sacrifice that resulted in the germinal foundation of the physical human body, which only consisted of warmth at that time, not yet visible outwardly, but different varying degrees of warmth. And we carry the heritage of that in the warmth of our blood, which is differentiated within our bodies. And the foundation for the 12 senses were laid in that time as well. So there you have this first great sacrifice. And each time when human beings are evolving, we are closely related to other beings who are going through their stages of development. And the beings we call the archai in our time were going through their human stage during that old Saturn period in obviously a very different form and way. And we were closely linked to these beings as a kind of vehicle for our development. But each time during one of these great planetary cycles, certain members of these archai that were at their human stage remain behind and don't make the grade. And those are then the Azuric beings that are now part of the unholy trinity, one could call them, the counter trinity. We move on to the second stage, the old sun stage. It's now the Kyriates, the spirits of wisdom. They're the highest member of the middle hierarchy that serves the sun principle, the daughter principle, and that the gift of the etheric body was bestowed through a great sacrifice that these Kyriates made, having looked up to the sacrifice of the thrones. And light and air were now part of that evolutionary manifestation. And during that time, the present archangels were at their human stage, and some of them remained behind. And this led to the development of Ahrimanic beings in our time. If we move on then to the third stage, the old moon, there it was the dunamis, the spirits of movement. They're the middle of the second hierarchy. And they then bestow the gift of the astral body through a great sacrifice. And at that time, the angels were closely related to us. They were going through their human stage, and they kind of gave us a vehicle for our own development. And again, around the middle of that evolutionary development of the old moon, certain of the angels who were at their human stage didn't make the grade, remained behind, and these then have become the Luciferic beings. So that you have then these three, Azuric, Ahrimanic, Luciferic beings as laggards of these three stages that are really a descending. Whenever you see this sevenfold evolution, there's three stages of descent. Then there's a fourth middle point, which is generally a turning point. And then you have later three ascending points. Now, what I especially want to emphasize here is that the earth stage is this pivotal one, because it's during this earth stage that the spirits of form, also referred to as the seven Elohim, provided the great sacrificial foundation for the bestowal of the ego, the I of the human being. And this I is the central member, you could say, of the sevenfold human being that could also be expanded to the ninefold human being if we include sentient soul, intellectual soul, consciousness soul as three aspects of this ego development. But the great sacrifice that was given by the thrones in old Saturn, the Curiosities on old Sun, the Dunamis on old Moon, we were not awake and capable of grasping any of this. We were still at a stage where we were sleeping to events around us. But now things have changed on the earthly level, so that in order to prepare for this descent of the I into the human astral, etheric, physical members, one of the seven Elohim, Yahweh, remained connected with the earth moon during the Lemurian stage. The Lemurian stage is a recapitulation during the earth stage of the old moon stage. And the Hyperborean stage, which came before that, was a recapitulation of the old sun. And it was during that Hyperborean stage that 6 of the Elohim, who had been united with the earth when it was still in a gaseous state, because they needed a more rapid evolution, they withdrew to the sun. But Yahweh remained behind with the earth moon, which were still united until the middle of the Lemurian epoch, when human bodies were in danger of hardening into statues, into rigid forms. And what was happening is human beings were not able to physically incarnate. Only the strongest were still able to incarnate. And the story of Adam and Eve represents these very strong individualities who could still incarnate as this crisis was happening. Then Yahweh removed the moon, which was much more fluid and volcanic at the time. And the moon then became the counterpart to the sun. And this moon crisis, or this crisis of hardening, was then relieved, and human beings could begin to incarnate again. But while they were pushed out, they were out in the planetary spheres. And when they came back in, they bore within them the imprint of these different planetary spheres that they had dwelt in during that time. And that leads then to the differentiation of races in the Atlantean period, which came after the Lemurian and is the first Earth stage proper. And you could say that in that middle of the Earth stage, when Atlantis was unfolding in its 7 stages, around the middle of that Atlantean period, the Christ impulse was already coming in, but it was not penetrating the physical earth as yet. It was still working from the sun. But in order to prepare for that I impulse that the 6 solar Elohim were destined to bring, the Yahweh divinity, the 7th Elohim, one could call him, was preparing the physical vessel for this Christ impulse to enter. And that was especially prepared through the Hebrew people, because Yahweh worked through the blood. And Yahweh was a night spirit. And Michael at that time worked with Yahweh as a night spirit. He can be seen as guiding these evolutionary impulses. And so we then have this preparation that took place. And we have, through the Hebrew people, we have through 42 generations, this preparation of this Jesus being. And of course, with the help of anthroposophy, we realize that there is actually two of these Jesus children who unite when the Nathan Jesus reaches the age of 12, which is sort of a focus in the Luke gospel. And from then on, they are united as one. We have the one being who's never incarnated before, the Nathan Jesus, the soul that was held back in the paradisical state. And then we have the Solomon Jesus, who had previously incarnated as Zarathustra, who brought this very mature ego development in at that age of 12. And together in this communion, at the age of 30, this communion had become ripe for receiving the Christ being. And that's when the baptism in the Jordan took place. And with that baptism, the 6 Elohim began to enter. Now you have to take into account these Elohim are beings that it's hard for us to fathom. You could say the radiance of the sun is the radiance of these Elohim. We hear how the Christ left his Atman on the sun when he descended towards the earth gradually. And the burning bush is where Moses began to witness this, I am the I am, etc. So this is then the pivotal event of Earth evolution, where the I am, the macrocosmic I am, bestowed the microcosmic counterpart on and pressed it in each and every human soul that had been participating in these former stages of evolution. However, it's really important to understand that this gift is like a germinal seed that we have to consciously help out of our freedom to unfold, because that's really what this higher ego a gift brings, is the gift of freedom and the potential for higher love. So this sacrificial deed was unlike the two thieves who were crucified on either side, who represented the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic one-sidedness. They were there because of their karma, their sins, so to speak. But the Christ in the middle had no such karma. This was a free sacrificial deed. And Lucifer, who was looking at this event through one of those thieves, as they were called, or malefactors, witnessed this as an experience that, unlike his own guilt and misdeeds, this being was expressing divine love. Infinite love is the primary attribute of the divine Trinity. It's not all power. The divinity shared that with the Ahrimanic forces, not all wisdom, which was shared with the Luciferic force, but infinite love. And it's hard to fathom what that really means. And that's why it's important to contemplate and ever return to this turning point in time. And unlike the Catholic version, where you often see the cross with the crucified one on it, in the anthroposophical approach, one has the rose cross, which are expressive of this sevenfold mystery of love. So I wanted to just review the larger sequence again. This is not the planetary one that we were looking at a little earlier. This is more the recapitulation. There's a law of recapitulation. Each of these periods lasts 2,160 years, which is 1/12 of what's called the Platonic year, which is 25,920 years, a kind of fullness of time for the hierarchies who don't have a physical, spatial world of experience. They experience this in a panoramic form. So they're able to experience this fullness of time, this 12-fold cycle, as a panoramic view. We have a little glimpse of that after death when we get an overview, a panorama of our past earthly life. But these higher hierarchies can see this as a organism, a time organism that has a kind of spatial quality to it. And in the Grail mysteries, one hears that when one approaches the Grail castle, time becomes space. And so even though we see Polarian, Hyperborean, Lemurian, Atlantean, post-Atlantean, which we're in the fifth stage, we're looking forward to the sixth great epoch in the future, which is manifest in the seven seals in the book of Revelation. And before we enter that sixth period, there is the war of all against all, which is the final cataclysmic apocalyptic event of our present great epoch of seven stages. And we being in the fifth, there's still the sixth. The sixth will be the ripe fruit of this sevenfold sequence. The seventh will be overripe, sometimes called the American. And we know Philadelphia, the age of brotherhood, the Sophian age that we're meant to prepare. That will be the ripe fruit that will carry over and inaugurate the sixth great epoch of the seals. And that's where this division of humanity, which will begin, especially with the war of all against all, will then lead to human beings incarnating into two different streams. Those who outwardly express the communion with the divine that comes to expression in outer beauty. And then there's those fallen souls where the ugly will show itself in their astral features. And it's important to know that the Manichaeans are forerunners of this task of redemption. We can't self-righteously look down to those who have been captured or fallen, but rather have the task of moving towards this infinite love. The Buddha expressed one of the divine virtues with compassion. And in the Parsival story, at first he enters a Grail castle and doesn't have that quality yet. So he has to leave again and go out, face more trials, so that eventually he comes back and he does now have that compassion. And it's when that compassion speaks through our words, then we're forging the Grail sword. We're forging the micro logos. But before we can do that, we have to take up the cross. The cross arises when we extend our sense of self to include not only our karmic relationships, which are often easier, but those who are often even our enemies. Where the Christ says, forgive them for they know not what they do, in relation to those who are pounding the nails into his hands at the crucifixion and his feet. So there are those who sin against the Holy Spirit, whose sins are not forgiven, because these are initiates of the left who should know better, but have chosen to serve the adversarial forces. So the seventh great epoch of the trumpets, which, as I said, there's two versions here in terms of the timing. This is the larger sequence and the Nuremberg cycle. It then culminates in the seventh trumpet, which is where the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars, clothed with the sun, who comes under attack. She's about to give birth, like has been happening since the 1930s, the Christ in his second coming. That's, you could say, one aspect of this woman being pregnant. She's embodying the mysteries of the night. The feminine mysteries are the mysteries of the night, the mysteries that have come down to us as the new Isis Sophian mysteries. Sophia is to become the bride of the Christ. The city of the New Jerusalem is referred to as the bride that comes down from heaven. And those who look at this through a religious lens often would like to see their own congregation and the church as this woman, as this bride. But it's not always such that these religious denominations who've broken up into various sectarian denominations are really in our time attuned to the genuine Christ impulse. So the dragon with the 7 heads and 10 horns, who represent the regression back to the Atlantean times when those 7 root races arose. Last time I tried to show how the first 4 group souls, the lion, the bull, the eagle, the animal human, represent these 4 great group soul that dominated the first 4 Atlantean. But then after that, the 5th Atlantean, the 6th and the 7th, you have the division of the sexes. So instead of heads with 1 horn, you have heads with 2 horns, which altogether make the 10 horns. And we can see in our time right now, the times we live in, that there are powerful racial identitarian impulses that are surging around us in the astral ocean, out of which this dragon arises. There's the lower astral world that is polluted with the Luciferic Ahrimanic forces, and would like to devour this emerging Christ ego impulse that on another level was hovering over the middle of the Atlantean period when Christ was still on the sun. So this woman can be seen as appearing back then in the Atlantean time, hovering above humanity, giving birth to this divine self from the sun, and her being reaching up to the zodiac, the 12 stars around her head, and the moon beneath her feet as the night wisdom. But then we have it in our time with the second coming in the etheric, and we see how the counterforces in the 1933, where this was meant to be coming to the fore, attacking the beast, as Steiner says, needs to arise, and we need to face the beast whose number is 666 before we can witness the Christ. We must witness the mystery of evil. In a certain paradoxical sense, Christ in our time isn't coming to solve the mystery of birth and death, which was the case in his first coming, but now it's the mystery of evil. Without him, we cannot overcome, we cannot put this dragon beneath our feet, because Michael is the countenance of Christ, and we need Michael to do battle. But part of this trumpets is that it leads over to the pralaya state between the earth evolution and the future Jupiter or New Jerusalem. There is then this division of humanity, this separation into two parts of humanity. The one that represent the bride that will unite with the Christ, and those who have become united with the whore of Babylon, who rides on the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns, who has a cup that isn't filled with the grail blood, but rather the serpents and foul things. This prostitution with matter, this succumbing to materialism and the death forces involves a loss of our immortality. And so this tragedy that unfolds in 7 stages for those who are not able to participate in this communion with the Christ being that leads over to the New Jerusalem comes to expression in the outpouring of the 7 vials of wrath, which come after the 7th trumpets. So here, I've shown this before, we're just mapping out some of these stages, that the Kali Yuga on the far left begins in 3101 BC. That's sometimes called the Dark Age. In Hindu tradition, you have the 4 yugas, the Sattva Yuga. In the West, that's often called the Golden Age, the Treta Yuga, the Silver Age, and the Dvapara Yuga, the Bronze Age, and then the Kali Yuga, the Iron Age. So each of these, they start with a very expanded time frame, and then they get more and more compressed. So whereas the Kali Yuga is like a 5,000 year period that lasts from 3101 BC to 1899. So 1899 is the dawning of a new age of light, although because of it coming just after this darkest age, we can witness the apocalyptic unfolding of time. But Rudolf Steiner's destiny was very closely connected with this transition from 1899 to 1900. That's when he really started to give his first esoteric lectures and connect with the Theosophical Society. In 1902, he became the chairman of the German section, and he expanded his influence to other parts of Europe and England. And you then have the Zorat being, which is the sun demon, which is the opponent of the Christ, coming into this evolutionary process. So that the Christ underwent the mystery of Golgotha in 33 AD, but the middle of the fourth post-Atlantean epoch, the Greco-Latin, began in 747 BC and lasted till 1413. So the middle of that 2,160 year period is the year 333. And you could say the divine powers, Michael, Christ powers, foresaw the intervention of the sun demon around 666. So the Christ then chose to come into incarnation 333 years before that middle point in order to counterbalance what was coming. Without that counterbalancing, the earth would have succumbed to the sun demon. And around that same time that the sun demon was coming in through Gundi Shapur, you had the rise of Arabism with the Muslim kind of revelation that Muhammad received, and that acted as a kind of dulling and weakening of the Zorat impulse, because it kind of took the ground from under its feet with its conquests that reached into Europe through North Africa and the like. So we have the second intervention of Zorat with the year 1332. That's where it's kind of always epicenters of time, not just that one year, like a event like a earth quake. It doesn't just hit in a specific spot on the earth crust. It sends out waves into all directions. And that's also the case with the Zorat impulse. It's a epicenter in time. And so the last time I spoke of how the Knights Templars were involved there, and they represented the right approach to the mystery of gold, which is related to the sun. They were seeking to deal with gold in a selfless way rather than the greed that is generally there. So we have in our time now the two major events. On the one hand, we have 1998, which is the third intervention of Zorat, and we have the impending incarnation of Ahriman. The transition to the sixth age is around 3573. That's where we're meant to transition from the consciousness soul age to the age of spirit self. And one can also call this the Sophian age, the age of brotherhood. So Steiner indicated before only a part of the third millennium has elapsed, there will be in the West an actual incarnation of Ahriman. Ahriman's incarnation will occur in the not too distant future. This time is approaching. Ahriman will appear. Among the most important means which Ahriman has to work with from the other side is the furthering of abstract thinking in human beings. So this third 666 and even the ones earlier inspires black magic. Black magic often begins with gray magic. It's kind of this transition. White magic is what we're called to develop in the future. where we learn to wield spiritual forces. And this is this major battle that on the one hand is at the end of Earth evolution, but as Steiner mentioned in the priest cycle, that trumpet is sounding since the turn of the millennium. So this is very much a part of our time experience, because the woman standing on the moon crowned with the stars is appearing in the etheric. And the birth pangs are there in the apocalyptic events, in what took place in Europe with the coming of Hitler at that time when this was meant to happen. That was an intervention of the beast who would arise, you could say, the two-horned beast, whose number is 666. And here we have the 7 letters as they're expressed. Just to recapitulate that, we're in the age of Sardis, the 5th letter, 1413 to 3374. And then we get the Russian Slavonic, the age of Philadelphia, 3574 to 5734. And then the so-called American Laodicea age from 5734 to 7894. And it's in that end of the Philadelphia period where we hear from Rudolf Steiner that women would become progressively barren. And the Slavic Russian people have they're a younger race development, and they bear within their racial karma the ability to free themselves from the physical plane, the physical body, which would happen towards the end of this Russia Slavonic period. And that will then lead to a situation where certain impulses that we can already see in America with transhumanism, posthumanism, an effort to seek to continue to incarnate on the physical plane beyond its right timing, which will lead to, as Steiner says, the animalization of human beings. So that culminates in the war of all against all, which is not now brought like the Lemurian fire catastrophe through volcanism, the Atlantean water catastrophe, the so-called ice age and the flood, but rather now it's human beings themselves and the strife between races, the strife between nations, the strife between the sexes, the classes, and the strife within the human being between their thinking and will, between their left side and right side, so that this conflict is building. And we need to be aware of the signs of that happening in our time, where immigrants are being demonized and sort of cages are being prepared to imprison them. And these are dehumanizing kinds of conditions that we wouldn't wish on those whom we love. And we need to learn to extend our love to all people, all individuals. We need to discover the universally human within ourselves and help to awaken it in others and prepare the emergence of a new world culture that Steiner said would begin here in the Pacific region, where the moon had been drawn out in the Lemurian time, and it left behind this great ring of fire as a wound in the earth. These moon forces, which are the focal point of the astral body of the earth are drawn in, all of humanity is gradually excarnating. And that means we have to loosen our relationship to the physical by cultivating a stronger relationship to the spirit, which will come to expression in the spirit self age in a ripe form. Now, one hears of how the three kings who were sort of prophetically anticipating this impulse of the Christ being, they were representatives of the three first, second, and third stages of the post-Atlantean epoch. And they laid these gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But Steiner gives another aspect to this in an esoteric lecture, where he says that in order for the heritage of those three first ages, ancient Indian, Persian, Egypto-Chaldean, to be carried over beyond the fourth Greco-Latin age into the fifth, sixth, and seventh, there needed to be representatives of those three ages, and that they needed to be raised from the dead by the Jesus Christ being to initiate them into this important task. And so the youth of 9, who had previously appeared as the youth of Zeus, spoken of in the legend, who lifted the veil of Isis and was struck dead, representing the Egyptian initiation form, was waning because now the Christ Osiris being was descending to the earth. And this youth of 9 then was raised from the dead. And this is described in I think it's the Luke Gospel, where he's being carried, his mother is there, and then there's these personages following him. And Steiner indicated one could see that mother as embodying Isis, the mourning Isis, and that these others who trailed behind the bier that was taking it to the grave were the Egyptian initiates. So the Christ renewed that impulse in a form that could be carried over into our consciousness soul, period. And the individuality, who's the leading initiate of our time, is this 9, youth of 9. The same individuality appeared as the Parsival individual, and in between he appeared as Mani, who started the Manichaean impulse. And Mani's impulse was particularly fruitful. It flowed into many other spiritual movements during the medieval period and the Renaissance, including the Rosicrucians, including the Templars, including the Freemasons, the Cathars, the Albigensians, and the like. And the second age, the Persian age, was represented by the individuality who reappeared as Lazarus. In a former incarnation, he had appeared as the builder of Solomon's temple, Hiram Abiff, who is the hero of the temple legend that the Freemasons work with and that Rudolf Steiner worked with in the higher classes of his esoteric school. And the higher stages of Rosicrucianism are closely connected with the initiation of Christian Rosenkreuz by Mani. So these streams work together in a certain respect. Lazarus reappears as Christian Rosenkreuz in several incarnations, and subsequently as the Saint Germain during the time of the French Revolution. And so there we have the individuality who will lead the sixth age. But there's a mystery that Steiner revealed in his last address regarding this Lazarus individuality, that together with the raising of Lazarus, the soul of John the Baptist, who had been in the spiritual world after the beheading by Herod, instigated by Herodias and the daughter Salome with her dance at his birthday. And so the head of John the Baptist carried on a silver charger is like an anti-grail image. The silver represents the moon. So instead of having the sun in the vessel, you have then this head of John the Baptist. And so John the Baptist and this Hiram soul together will play a leading role in both preparing and leading this sixth post-Atlantean age, which will be the ripe fruit of these 7 ages. And it's important to know that this communion that Christ, through the raising of Lazarus, brought about, both of these individuals had been around the age of 30, Lazarus and John the Baptist when he was beheaded. And this led to the new individuality, John the Divine, Lazarus John, who's the author of the Gospel of John, the book of Revelation, that this involves a communion between the Cain and Abel streams. And Hiram obviously was aligned to the Cain stream. There's reports that he was, in fact, the Cain individuality and reincarnated as Hiram. And in the case of John the Baptist, both of his parents were of the priestly stream. The priestly, the shepherd stream, is the Abel stream. And so this was the healing of the Cain and Abel rift in the evolution of humanity. And Steiner pointed out in the aftermath of the burning of the Goetheanum that there were 3 mysteries that anthroposophists needed to take up. One was the Child of Europe, Caspar Hauser event. The other was this appearance in Russia of the Tsar, purported to be the son of the father of Demetrius. Demetrius, one has the true and false Demetrius. It's too big a story to bring here. But in both of those instances, Caspar Hauser and this appearance of Demetrius, the backward Cain and Abel streams represented by the backward Freemasons, the backward Cain stream, the backward Abel stream, and the Jesuit stream. Steiner says these 2 hated the middle stream, represented by the 2 Johns in the middle, that they hated one another. There was hate between those 2 streams, but they hated the middle stream more. and they made a pact against the middle, which resulted in the burning of the Goetheanum, which Steiner refers to as the jealousy of men. So in these two streams, you have individuals who are initiated, but have crossed the threshold in a manner that doesn't embrace the whole of humanity, doesn't embrace the larger Christ mysteries. The Jesuits generally recognize the Jesus being, but not the Christ being. The backward Freemasons keep women out. The first gesture Steiner did when he worked with Freemasonry was to hold a lecture with only men, only women, and then men and women together once he started to actually work and ground this impulse in a new form. And then the ancient Indian will be renewed through the daughter of Jairus, who was raised from the dead. And that individuality, which is shrouded in more mystery, would help to lead this seventh age, which again is the lukewarm age. So after this theme we just went through of the 7 ages, in the book of Revelation, then you have the 4th chapter to the 6th chapter, this appearance of a throne. And there's a sealed scroll with 7 seals. And there is this a mood of soul where John ends up weeping because he's told that no one on heaven and earth can open this sealed book. And there's 7 beasts with each having 6 wings with eyes front and back, and this book is written. The scroll is written inside and outside. It's an exoteric and an esoteric dimension. The seraphim, these lofty spirits who have helped to inspire the old group souls of humanity, those first 4 stages. And there's the 24 elders, who are the older brothers of humanity who have gone through their human stage, 7 of them in the old Saturn, 7 of them in the old moon, 7 of them in the old sun and the old moon. And so that brings 21. And then we've had 22, 23, 24 in the Polarian, Hyperborean, Lemurian, and the Atlantean. You end up with these 24 elders, those who have gone before us and reached this human stage in another form. And they surround this mystery of the throne, where lightnings and thunders and a sea of glass is there. And then this who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof. And one of the elders speaks to John and says that the Lion from the tribe of Judah has succeeded in opening the book and loosening the seal thereof. But when he actually looks to the throne, it's not the lion, but rather the lamb, the sacrificial lamb, which is what the Christ at the turning point of time, which happened in the age of Aries, under the sign of the ram. And these 4 living creatures, the 3, the eagle has to do with thinking, the lion with feeling, the bull with the will, and then this more angelic human being related to the waterman. These are related to the zodiac cross. that the lion represent the heart forces. So the lamb, the sacrificial lamb, arises out of those heart forces. The tribe of Judah was the one who fulfilled this karma of the Hebrew people. So, and I saw and behold, in the midst of the throne and before living creatures, and in the midst of the ancients, a lamb standing as it were slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. And this star figure with 7 points sort of represents this being who encompasses our entire planetary system, is kind of, you could say, the ruler of this planetary system. And what does it mean that he is able to open the book? So if we go back to this, these ages, in each of these ages, the karma of the individuals who participated in each of these ages is being sealed up in the book of karma, the book of life. And so what we're writing into that book now in the age of Sardis, that is there behind the 5th seal of that book. What's going to come to expression in the Russian Slavonic period is going to be sealed behind the 6th seal. And then what karma unfolds in human evolution during the 7th age will be sealed behind that 7th seal. And who is worthy to open those seals? It's the Lord of karma. The Christ as the Lord of karma is the one who opens those seals. And so in our European present age of Sardis that was inaugurated in Europe, 1413 to 3574, we still have a ways to go. What we're doing now during these incarnations is being sealed. And if one reads what's there in the 5th seal, you hear about the altar and those beneath the altar who have white garments, who are crying out, "How long, O Lord, worthy and true, dost thou not judge those who have persecuted us?" And that they're told to still wait for a season. Those are the souls who united themselves with the Christ impulse during our present age of Sardis. They will be those who will wear those garments beneath the altar, who are awaiting the 6th age. And if we look at then the Philadelphia age, which, as I said, is the ripe fruit of this whole sequence, it will be unsealed in this 6th seal. And what is it that happens in the narrative of that 6th seal? We hear about the sealing of the chosen ones, those who are able to receive the seal of the living God of the New Jerusalem on their foreheads. They're the ones who are preparing the New Jerusalem, the Golden City. And we hear how they sing a new song. They gather on Mount Zion, which is the Sun Mount, as opposed to Mount Moriah, where Solomon's temple is. That's where the Coenaculum was, where the upper room, where the Christ had his Last Supper, and where later they gather for the Pentecost event, where the gift of the Holy Spirit is bestowed. So that gift of the Holy Spirit that we hear of in the Acts of the Apostle, that will reach its fuller expression in this 6th age. And we're called to prepare that. And the Slavic Russian people have a special role to play. But these backward brotherhoods, especially the Freemasonic, but also the Jesuits, are trying to thwart this plan. So that's where this false Demetrius comes into the picture. You can speak about it another time. And also these efforts that were made by the Anglo-American brotherhoods to bring the left-leaning political ideology that was born in Central Europe through individuals like Lenin, who was carried in a sealed train together with some of his compatriots from Germany into Russia, and where Marxism was now going to hit the ground running. And you have Trotsky, who the Canadians allowed to go to England, and the English allowed him to grow into Russia. And there's evidence that certain money interests in America went to Russia at that crucial time with lots of money. They were kind of masquerading as Red Cross representatives, and they handed out money to all of the different political groups that were vying for power in Russia. So there's a manipulation that's going on by these backward initiates. Steiner calls them initiates of the left, or brothers of the shadow. So that's something that then leads also to the betrayal of the spiritual heritage by the second fall of humanity, which is the fall of intelligence that's represented by this seal of the horseman that unfolds with the seven seals. So the first four seals have to do with the descent of intelligence. The white horse, the rider has a golden crown. That's when human intelligence was still endowed with the golden sun forces. And the rider has a bow. He still has a sure aim. That's related to the heritage of the old ancient Indian culture, which again, those seven seals unlock the karma of the seven letters, the seven post-Atlantean ages. And then the second rider who rides the red horse, that would be the metamorphosis of the Persian epoch in the age of the seals. And he has a sword and brings strife. You have now the Mars forces coming in, the aggressive forces. Ahriman came into the picture in that Persian epoch, and the battle began. And yet agriculture came into play, and a new relationship to the earth, and death, of course, began to come with Ahriman. So the next horse is black, and that's where the rider has scales, and you hear about wheat and barley being traded in the market, and hurt not the oil and the wine, which were ritual substances that were still to be protected. So you have Lucifer leading over to Ahriman at the end of the Persian epoch, but now Ahriman comes more fully to the fore with the black horse, the death forces, and weighing and measuring and counting takes the intellect a step down deeper into matter that can be weighed, measured, and counted. And then we have the pale horse, and that is the counterpart to the fourth age that's being unsealed, the age of the Greco-Latin period, when the Christ appeared. But that's when humanity crossed a certain boundary from nature into the world of subnature. Intelligence started to become ghostly. And in the consciousness soul interpretation of the book of Revelation that Steiner gave in the priesthood course, he says that the trumpets in that time frame for the consciousness soul began with the Crusades. And the seals began around the time of the mystery of Golgotha. So these descent of the intellect, you could say, was happening during that time of the Greco-Latin. And so we have to see how time metamorphoses and plays into each other. And with the development of the computer, which during the Second World War, First World War, all of these wars magnify and amplify technology. And I was showing how Alvin Turing, who died with an apple apparently laced with cyanide, committed suicide. At that time, it was not acceptable to be a homosexual. And he was given then a drug that is kind of a chemical castration that led him to contribute to his suicide. But the selection of the apple, the poison fruit from the tree of knowledge, was being eaten, and a new era was being brought in. The rider of the pale horse is death itself, and the hell follows after it. The spectral world of sub-earthly intelligence starts to arise. And that is very much a part of the challenge of our time. So we need this Michael impulse, as Steiner indicated in this, in these words. The Michael age has dawned. Hearts begin to have thoughts. Enthusiasm no longer flows from mystical obscurity, but from inner clarity that thought conveys. To grasp this is to receive Michael into one's soul. Thoughts that today seek to grasp the spirit must spring from hearts that beat for Michael as the fiery cosmic prince of thought. So I'm recapping various things here. All of humanity has been crossing the threshold according to this consciousness soul interpretation. That seal on the left appears in relation to the 10th and 11th chapter. The reason those pillars have Yachim and Boaz, J and B, is in the 11th chapter. John is asked to measure the temple, given a reed, and the temple, of course, had these two pillars at the entry. And one hears the seven thunders. I've spoken before how these relate to the seven unutterable truths that couldn't be written down at that time. And each of these seven steps in evolution always have a specific mystery. The fourth mystery related to the fourth in a sequence is the mystery of incarnation, birth, and excarnation, death. But the fifth mystery is the mystery of evil. That's the one we're having to face in our time. As when you cross the threshold, which these two pillars represent, one may recall in the 13th chapter, the one beast with the seven heads rises out of the waters of the astral ocean on the left, and the Ahrimanic arises out of the dry land on the right, and we need to go this middle way through the portal between the pillars. And we're given that book to eat in the Michael school in the spiritual world. Michael shared that book with those who were preparing anthroposophy in the spiritual world. And it's sweet like honey in the mouth, but it gets bitter in the belly because, as I said, once one takes this up, you have to bear the cross of sharing the karma through compassion of those around you. You're not this little imprisoned soul in your skin. You become an expanded human being who has a participatory consciousness that extends into nature, that experiences the mystery of elemental beings behind nature who serve the hierarchies. They stand behind earth, air, water, fire, that everything is condensed music and tone. Everything physical has vibratory spiritual impulses behind it that human beings can learn to wield in the future. But as we cross that threshold, we have to meet the lower guardian. The lower guardian puts before us our own lower self, our own double shadow that has to be redeemed and owned. And through the redemption of the double, through the transformation of the lower self, we earn the right to meet our higher self, which comes to expression in our higher soul, embodied in that seal on the right, the woman standing on the moon. The moon is related to the realm of intelligence, and the moon is related to silver, and mirror are made with the help of silver. And the intellect is a reflective aspect of our brain. The lowest is the physical brain. The etheric brain is within the physical brain. When we learn to shift our consciousness from the physical brain to the etheric brain, then the thoughts become living. They become image building thoughts. They become heart thoughts. So we have to build a lemniscate between head and heart, and the throat chakra is in between. The exercises for the heart are the 6 basic exercises. And the exercises for the throat are the 8-fold path that the Buddha gave, that Steiner brought in a new form. And then the philosophy of freedom is very much given to the 2-petal lotus, the forehead. And so we have a lot of work to do, but because in this transition from the 4th to the 5th, which has to do with leading the heritage of the old moon, the planet of wisdom, over to the planet of love, which can only be done with the help of Christ, there are those who reject that. And as a result, there's a separation of a part of humanity into the 8th sphere, which is a spectral realm that's between the physical and the etheric. It's denser than the etheric. And this spectral world is growing more powerful. And here I'm just showing again this threshold event, these 2 pillars, and that there's a division of humanity into 3 when we cross the threshold. The geographic east represents the cloud people, where the thinking is in the foreground. The people in the west, the Americas, is where the fiery will forces are at home. And the Middle Europeans are the cloud people, where the feeling side of human nature is geographically more embodied. And there's 3 gifts that can be received at this boundary, which began in the 1840s. And that has to do with eugenic occultism for the East. Those are the birth mysteries. Hygienic occultism, the healing mysteries for the Middle Europeans especially, and mechanical occultism for those in the West. And for this, understanding this, we need to have more of an etheric geography, where the north-south mountain ranges are, for example, are the very strongest magnetic forces, in the Earth's geography, and that's where Silicon Valley is located, the Gates Empire, Hollywood, which has its back door where the porn films have been spread across the planet, and in the meantime taken up by others in other places. But the feeding of the lower nature, and Ahriman has no heart, no middle region. So that's where cold and heartless cruelty can come in. Sadomasochism can come in. Lucifer, on the other hand, would lead us into drugs and wanting to escape from the earth, suicide, take shortcuts to the spiritual, meditative practices that are out of its right timing. But these three gifts have a good and a bad side to them. So there's a positive eugenic occultism and a negative one. There's a positive form of mechanical occultism, the Strader machine that Steiner referenced in the mystery plays. And then the healing impulse that Steiner tried to give very much through his work with Ita Wegman, who was leading the medical section. We have some of this hygienic occultism, but it too has its dark side. So we see in Angels Weaving into the Astral Body lecture, Steiner speaks of there's three gifts that the angels are bestowing on human astral body. But if we remain asleep, if we don't wake up to what the angels are weaving, then they're forced to weave it into the sleeping bodies. And as a result, the three positive gifts take on their negative counterpart. And this weaving was beginning to happen in the last third of the 20th century. So this has already been happening, and we're seeing the results of this. So present-day human beings must look at the rise of Michael in the 70s of the last century, at the appearance of Christ in the first half of the 20th century, and the threatening rise of Zorat and Zoratians at the end of the 20th century. Let us arrange our lives in accordance with these three mysteries of our time, the Michael mystery, the Christ mystery, and the Zorat mystery, as understanding human beings who know how to interpret the signs of our times. That was lecture 8, Working of the Priests. Zorat will show himself before the end of this century already, and he will appear in a great many people as a being by whom they will be possessed. One will see people coming up to one, and one will not be able to believe that they are really human beings. They would develop in a very strange way, even outwardly. They will be intensive, strong natures outwardly with fierce features and a destructive rage in their emotions. They will have a face in which one will see a kind of beast's face outwardly. Zorat men will also be recognized outwardly. They will be those who not only ridicule spiritual beings, they will fight it in the most terrible way, and they will want to thrust it down into a cesspool. One will see that what is concentrated in a small region in present-day Russian communism will be inserted into the whole earth. This is from the whole evolution of humanity. That's from that same lecture. So this has also to do with gender in a feminine incarnation. We're looser in the physical. In a male incarnation, we overshoot the golden mean and penetrate more into subnature. I've shown in the past how the scientific revolution was to begin with in the Royal Society an all-male endeavor. Women were excluded. In Freemasonry, many of the lodges still practice men only. And that Steiner indicated that there would be a strong contrast between men and women in the Anglo-American spiritual life. An increasing difference between men and women will arise in Anglo-American civilization. Anglo-American spiritual life will, in essence, descend to the future through women, while that which lives in male bodies will strive towards such an ideal as I have described. This will set the pattern of the future Anglo-American race. There is apparent in the West, from certain mysterious depths, a tendency to oppose the teaching of repeated earth lives. An opposition to it as regards the future is noticeable in certain very enlightened circles among the English and Americans. It is desired in certain spiritual centers in the West to cause the gradual cessation of these repeated earth lives. The object is this: through a certain schooling, a certain acquisition of forces to transpose certain human souls into a condition in which after death they feel themselves more and more akin to the conditions and forces of the earth, acquiring almost a mania for earth forces. The Anglo-American race is striving after a remarkable and strange ideal, no longer to return into earthly bodies, through the souls of the living, to have an ever greater influence on the earth, becoming as souls more and more earthly. All efforts are thus to be directed to the ideal of making life here on earth and life after death similar to the one to the other. Various practices are intended to bring home vividly to the man of this race that his body belongs to the earth. He is to feel not only I am my arms, my legs, but I am also the force of gravity passing through my limbs. I am the weight which encumbers my hand or arm. A strong physical sense of relationship between the human body and the earthly elements is to be acquired. A very interesting point is that this ideal can be appropriately followed only by the male population. Hence, in spite of all political endeavors, an increasing difference between men and women will arise in Anglo-American civilization. Anglo-American spiritual life will, in essence, descend to future ages through women, given in July 9th, 1918. And this is related closely in various lectures where Steiner speaks of the double. He speaks of Ireland, for example, and that a certain population had been, through the help of initiates of early ages, brought there, and that it was one of the places where these Ahrimanic forces were not present, where there was a certain reflection of the paradisical world. And they were instrumental, these Irish initiates, to help to stop the voyages from Norway to America, where they were studying illnesses and the like, from continuing, and to create a kind of fence around Europe to protect it from these forces until a later time, after Christianity had more time to really unfold. So a short time before we are born, we are permeated by another being. In our terminology, we would call it an Ahrimanic spirit being. This is within us, just as our own soul is within us. These beings spend their life using human beings in order to be able to be in the sphere where they want to be. These beings have an extraordinary high intelligence and a significantly developed will, but no warmth of heart at all. Nothing of what we call human soul warmth, Gemüt. Thus we go through life in such a way that we have both our souls and a double of this kind, who is much more clever, very much more clever than we are, who is very intelligent, but with a Mephistophelian intelligence, an Ahrimanic intelligence, and also an Ahrimanic will, a very strong will, a will that is much more akin to the nature forces than our human will, which is regulated by the warmth of soul. In the 19th century, natural science discovered that the nervous system is permeated by electrical forces. Natural science is right, but when natural science believes that the nerve force that belongs to us as the basis of our conceptual life has something to do with electrical streams that go through our nerves, then they are incorrect. For the electrical streams, which are the forces put into us by the being I have just mentioned and described, do not belong to our own being at all. We carry electrical streams in us, but they are a purely Ahrimanic nature. These beings of high intelligence, but of purely Mephistophelian intelligence, and with a will more akin to nature than can be said of human will, these beings once decided out of their own will that they did not want to live in that world in which they were destined to live by the wisdom-filled gods of the higher hierarchies. They wanted to conquer the earth, and to do this, they need bodies. They do not have their bodies of their own. They make use of us, as much of us, of the human body as they can, because the human soul cannot entirely fill up the human body. So this is in Geographic Medicine in St. Gallen, the lecture, the second lecture. And he says in that same lecture that most of the illnesses are arise spontaneously within the organism, not through outer pollution or the like, come from this being. So those who want to practice healing arts need to become aware of this. And if you remember the section I just read about the male having a kinship to these Ahrimanic forces by overshooting that golden mean in a downward direction, Ahriman will especially work through the male population in America, especially in those north-south mountain ranges, but the whole of America, the looked at astrally from the spiritual world, has subnature forces that are like burning through the crust of the earth and impacting the population. So that's why we hear of the incarnation of Ahriman in the West, because it's the suitable place. And he won't incarnate as a woman, but as a man. On the same theme, I must emphasize a further peculiarity of this being. It would incur the gravest danger if under present conditions it were to accompany man through death. At present, it cannot do so. Therefore, it disappears shortly before death in order to save itself. Yet it retains the impulse to order human life in such a way that it would be able to conquer death for its own purposes. It would be terrible for human evolution if this being, which has taken hold of man, were able to overcome death, and so, by dying with man, to pass over into the worlds which man enters after death. The double absolutely cannot endure, they cannot endure death. Therefore, they must always leave this human body in which they have established themselves before the body succumbs to death. This is a very harsh disappointment again and again, for just what they want to attain, to remain in human bodies beyond death, is thwarted. To do this would be a lofty achievement in the kingdom of these beings. Up until now, they have not attained this. I have frequently pointed out, this is Rudolf Steiner speaking about the double, quite deliberately, including in public lectures, that human consciousness is associated with forces of destruction. Into our nervous system, we die. These forces, these death forces, will become ever more powerful, and a connection will be made between the death forces in the human being, which are related to electromagnetic forces, and outer machine forces. In a sense, the human being will be able to let his thoughts pass into the machine forces, and yet undiscovered forces within the human being will be discovered, forces that have an effect on outer electrical and magnetic forces. So Steiner speaks of how this double is geographic, and there's different forces working in the different regions of the earth, and they radiate out from the center of the earth. And you could say that Luciferic beings maybe prefer many of the bodies in the eastern geographic regions, and those are Ahrimanically predisposed in the west. But there's people who have to do battle with Ahriman, like Emerson, who was a paramount example, as Rudolf Steiner says, of the positive relationship to these subnature forces. He was very much of someone who discovered Goethe and was deeply immersed in Goethean science. So we need to recognize how we have to avoid becoming entrenched just in our own geographic region. Each of us need to embrace the heritage of all of these regions and their three great gifts that I spoke of. And this is just a chart again of these different etheric forces that are at work. And you can see in America, you have very different forces at work, life ether, as opposed to the warmth ether here in the Pacific region, and the chemical ether in the Atlantic and parts of Europe. And then, of course, light ether in the Slavic, Russian, and some of these Asian regions. So we need to study this for the sake of a new medicine, but also to become familiar with the double. And these are a couple of Americans who had kind of some intuitive foreknowledge. Nathaniel Hawthorne, in his House of Seven Gables, wrote, "Then there is electricity, the demon, the angel, the mighty physical power, the all-pervading intelligence. It is a fact, or have I dreamt it, that by means of electricity, the world of matter has become a giant nerve vibrating thousands of miles in a breathless point of time. Rather, the round globe is a vast head, a brain, instinct with intelligence, or shall we say, it is itself a thought, nothing but a thought, and no longer the substance which we deemed it." So that was in 1851, before a lot of this technology and electronics was developed. In 1938, you got Wells published a collection of essays on the future organization of knowledge and education called The World Brain. Through the book, Wells described his vision of the world brain, a new free synthesis of authoritative, permanent world encyclopedia that could help world citizens make the best use of universal information resources and make the best contribution to world peace. And Steiner then indicated that this was an early lecture excerpt from 1904, December 16th. "The physical atom is condensed electricity. The fact has become known to occultists for millennia. Now one is beginning to realize that the physical atom is condensed electricity. But there is still a second thing to be considered, what electricity itself is. That is still unknown. They are ignorant of one thing, namely, where the real nature of electricity must be sought. The nature of electricity cannot be discovered by means of any outer experiment or through outer observation. The secret which will be discovered is that electricity, when one learns to view it from a particular level, is exactly the same as what human thought is. Human thought is the same thing as electricity, viewed one time from the inside, another time from the outside. Whoever is now aware of what electricity is, knows that there is something living with him, in him, which in a frozen state forms the atom. Here is the bridge from human thought to the atom. One will learn to know the building stones of the physical world. They are tiny condensed monads, condensed electricity. In that moment, when human beings realize this elementary occult truth about thought, electricity, and the atoms, in that same moment, they will have understood something which is of the utmost importance for the future and for the whole of the sixth post-Atlantean epoch. They will have learned how to build with atoms through the power of thinking. So we've got this secret is being tapped into, and we have individuals who feel at home in this world of the electrification, who want to lead it from the present condition of human evolution, where the biological is in the foreground, and they've embraced this silicon world that the computer has brought to the fore, and the World Wide Web, etc. And they have engendered, I believe, through the inspiration of the Ahrimanic double, who, as we learned a few slides back, wants to overcome death. How to do that? Well, one way to do it is to inspire human beings to believe that this biological evolution is transitional, that our real goal is to create humanoid robots which can have the equivalent of the human electrical forces at work in the brain and the nervous system copied and downloaded, uploaded into such a humanoid robot, which would allow these doubles to overcome death and have a way of propagating themselves, because we hear how making these more and more autonomous, and that they will not just be intelligent like us, but they're moving towards this superintelligence. And transhumanism primarily originated in California during the 60s and was decisively influenced by the vision of the futurist Faridun M. Esfandiari, by the commitment of Timothy Leary, the pioneer of the psychedelic movement, and by the cryonics expert Robert Enninger. In the late 1980s, this movement gave rise to the extropians around Max Moore. And as European involvement increased, the World of Transhumanist Association, founded by Nick Bostrom, David Pierce, and Anders Sandberg in 1998. So we know 1998 is a pivotal year. That was the third 666 cycle that is a epicenter of time. Technological posthumanism, on the other hand, unites a number of authors who have been propagating the replacement of humans by artificial intelligence since the mid-80s. Its main four proponents were Hans Moravec, Franz Tripler, Marvin Minsky, and Ray Kurzweil, argue on the basis of cybernetic theory. And whereas the transhumanism, the subject of development is humankind and what becomes of human beings with the help of technological upgrades and enhancement, in posthumanism, robots and artificial intelligence are the future carriers of evolution and progress in a virtual habitat. The immortal existence of humans is a welcome side effect of the autonomous progress of artificial intelligence, post-human beings. Now, who are the most significant thinkers in post-humanism? In his work, Mind Children, Future Robot and Human Intelligence, the roboticist Hans Moravec offered a vision of a post-biological and supernatural future for humankind. And anyways, I spoke of this the last time, that the first 666 cycle was around Jundi Shapur, the Knights Templars, and this second epicenter centered in 1332. The third realm in 1998 is attack in the realm of thinking. So the new Christ rhythm is given at the end of the Kali Yuga. That's a 33-year rhythm Steiner speaks of. So 1933 was the first, and that is an impulse of will where Hitler sought to usurp it. And he was in the service of Zorat, or an incorporation of Zorat. And then 1966, it was more of an attack in the realm of feeling. In each case, there's positive and negative sides to this impulse. And in 1998 or 99, it's thinking. So we live in the after effects of that 1998 epicenter, where all of these technological developments came about before and after that period. And you have Elon Musk, I mentioned this before, conversation with Larry, who's one of the two founders of Google, founded in 1998 at that very epicenter. He's a post-humanist, and Musk says, and it became apparent to me that Larry did not care about AI safety. I think perhaps the thing that gave it away was when he called me a speciesist for being pro-human, as in, like a racist, but poor species. So I'm like, wait a second, what side are you on, Larry? And I then last time pointed out that this all takes on religious overtones. Karen Howe, who just finished her book, Empires of AI, so going back to this idea that there is an ideological clash that really shapes those technologies. One thing that happened in the last few years within the AI world and within the Silicon Valley world is there are really what can only be described as quasi-religious movements that has been born. Religious, yes, quasi-religious movements that have been born. And the reason I say this is because there are a lot of people within this world who believe in what I call the artificial general intelligence religion. This is a religion where you think that it's possible to recreate human intelligence. This is something that there isn't actually scientific consensus on this. So even the people who talk about this, they themselves talk about it as a belief. It's just, either have the belief or you don't. And if you do have the belief, then the second tenet is you believe it's going to create civilizational transformation. And there are two factions within this religion. There are the boomers who think that civilizational transformation will be hugely positive. AGI will bring us to utopia. And the other faction believe that transformation will be largely devastating. Those are the doomers. AGI could potentially kill us all. And so I last time pointed to these tech leaders that there is an Ahrimanic version of immortality. That's the wounded head of the beast. As you remember, in the 7 heads and 10 horns, I was speaking of the last three heads have two horns, and the fifth head is where the wound began. That has to do with the division of the sexes, and that the monthly rhythm of the feminine cycle is the bleeding of that wound. And human beings lost their paradisical state, and the genders are half of two wholes, and two halves of a whole that have to be reunited in the second half of the earth in this Mercury caduceus, this higher love that will engender human beings who embody a higher androgyny. This is sort of the healing staff, the night and day forces. The masculine is more attuned to the day forces, the feminine to the night. Remember, I referred to the mysteries of the night, the Isis Sophia mysteries, the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars, clothed with the sun. Those feminine mysteries are missing in these people that are shown here. They want to create another version. Bezos want to go up into space physically rather than spiritually lifting the veil of Isis. He wants to go create these big wheels up there in space in some kind of technological utopia. Both of these, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, have been in retirement, and they've come back now that OpenAI has created an explosion in artificial intelligence. And of course, Ray Kurzweil has been on this bandwagon of immortality and this for quite some time. Peter Thiel has been writing about his interpretation of the Book of Revelation in regards to these. Larry Ellison has invested in research to extend human life and achieve physical immortality. He just recently became the second richest person on the planet after Elon Musk, bypassing Zuckerberg. And as I said, other people are speaking about this new religion. So we create an image of the beast. Lucifer attacks from the head. Ahriman attacks from the below the feet, up through the feet. That's why the foot washing was a protection against Ahriman. But Ahriman reaches up to the sexual forces. And if Christ is not there in the middle region of the heart, he can pull the intelligence down to serve the lower nature. That is a way of animalizing the human being, and a regressive evolution into racial and ethnic kind of identitarianism. This Yuval Noah Harari has written numerous books, latest on this theme of AI, and he too speaks of it as AI could kickstart the next big religion. So what one can see happening is artificial intelligence will expand into this internet, which, with the help of the Cold War between China and the US, is being amplified. Huge amounts of money are being poured in by all these countries are now expanding their military budgets. We're getting ready for World War III. AI will play a big role in this preparation. As I said, hypersonic missiles can arrive in such a short time that human beings can't keep up with these things, that AI will be making decisions on that level, reading the radar. And at the same time, these AI agents are coming into our homes and living rooms and our educational institutions. I quoted the founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, is saying in 10 years, AI will be taking over education and medicine. And just recently had a robot performing a major surgical intervention autonomously. And so we have this super intelligence on the horizon, huge amounts of money because investors are pouring into these companies billions of dollars. The company that's been in the foreground, interestingly enough, started out as working with gaming, creating these, instead of the usual computer chips, you have then these chips that are especially suited for AI. The same company was also providing chips for creating this digital money, like Bitcoin mining. And lo and behold, this company has just passed the 4 trillion mark. And the second major cryptocurrency, Ethereum, has just passed that 4 trillion mark as well. It's now in this big league of investment. So money will become more and more a digital factor as well. So I know we've been going on here for quite some time, so I need to wind down, and let me finish with a couple of final quotes here. During the fourth post-Atlantean age, the mystery of birth and death were in the foreground, but in the present fifth one, men will have to strive with evil, particularly by controlling different forces of nature. The impulses of evil will influence the world in tremendous, gigantic measure. And the opposition which men will have to develop out of spiritual depths will give rise to the opposite, to the good forces. Already the fifth epoch, when the exploitation of the forces of electricity, which will take on entirely different dimensions, will enable man to bring evil into the world, and evil will also spread over the earth as a direct result of electricity. So in his last communication to the members, Steiner spoke of that danger of following these electrical forces into that subnature world. Back in 1911, Steiner spoke of the future time when we would have wireless installation undreamt of by our ancestors to transmit our thoughts all over the earth. And what good does it do us? The most trivial, unproductive thoughts are sent hither and thither. In our heads, there's nothing worth sending from place to place, for our thoughts are cheerless. Moreover, since we have had our present means of communication, they have become even more cheerless than they were conveyed in the old snail-like fashion. A few years earlier, Steiner had indicated that, quote, people will master the forces of nature to a high degree, as we have seen with wireless telegraphy and aeronautics. It is not without consequences whether the air is filled with spiritual thoughts or with thoughts of material needs. This will engulf the entire planet. We're looking into an age when humanity will intrude in large measure into the air and light-filled space. What will be the fruits of this age? Seen in their true form, it can be said that these electromagnetic waves will work back into the forces of the earth. They will, according to good and evil, earthquakes and earth tremors will appear as the effects of human deeds. And this will also work on the life forces in those geographic regions in a way that will deaden them. And we're starting to see weather anomalies. We're starting to see the effects of climate change. The whole Earth's rhythms are being thrown out of their healthy rhythm into these harmonically influenced directions. So we have to wake up to this emerging nervous system, this unenlightened global brain. Electricity, it says, modern physicists have conjured and juggled about with electricity in a strange way, without the least suspicion. Anyways, this is already something that I spoke of earlier. So let me just focus on the second part. The greatest contrast to electricity is light. If we look upon light as electricity, we confuse good and evil. The force, we lose sight of the true conception of evil in the order of nature if we do not realize that through the electrification of the atoms, we transform them into carriers of evil. We do not only transform them into carriers of death, as explained in my last lecture, but into carriers of evil. When we think of them as atoms in general, when we imagine matter in the form of atoms, we transform these atoms into carriers of death. But when we electrify matter, nature is conceived as something evil. For electric atoms are little demons of evil. So Steiner pointed out that when we look at the world in this world of electrified atoms, we're creating a kind of occult imprisonment. And that's what we're teaching our children with these modern scientific worldview that don't have the counterpart of seeing the spiritual as the originator of the material world. And in another place where Steiner spoke of this was in Michaelmas and the Soul Forces of Man. He said, when we look at the world in this way of seeing the electrified atoms, then the Ahrimanic forces, which otherwise can't reach these elemental beings who are there living in nature, can begin to gorge themselves on these elemental beings. And that means those elemental beings are drawn into the service of Ahriman. So the way we look at the world, the way we look at children, makes a difference. Steiner says since 1879, we become what we think. So if we believe what modern science, which is true on certain levels, if we take it and look at the human being as just a higher animal, and if human beings begin to believe that and live by it, then this is what they will become. They're on the way to becoming that. And that means losing your higher humanity in your next incarnation. So I have pointed out before that I feel certain types of autism, which are very much disproportionately present in the population in Silicon Valley, these nerdy types who are working to develop these technologies, are individuals who are being taken over by the double. And this comes to expression in a kind of compulsive thinking and willing that has often a narrow focus that lacks the heart forces, the rhythmic middle forces. And they're able to gain this access to the superintelligence that the double can mediate, and a strong will that can lead over to work in factories, etc., and engineering and all of this. But this is really becoming Ahriman's minions. Factories, Steiner indicated, that are filled with these electrical forces are like spiritually empty places. They're like black holes. And so that's the world we're creating with all these servers that are basically big warehouses with these devices humming and needing more and more electricity. And they're not only there on the Earth, they're there in these satellites. So the danger is that we prepare for this subnature world, entering the human being and helping the double to become our future. And there's various people have been warning about this, and including Geoffrey Hinton, he used to work for Google. He quit so he could start to talk about these kinds of things. It could be less than 5 years until AI systems have 100 trillion connections, roughly as many as there are between neurons in the human brain. And he said he often referred to as the godfather of AI, said he quit his job at Google so that he could freely speak about the risks of AI. Hinton is worried about the increasingly powerful machines' ability to outperform humans in ways that are not in the best interest of humanity, and the likely inability to limit AI developments. Hinton said he long thought that computer models weren't as powerful as the human brain. Now he sees artificial intelligence as relatively imminent existential threat. AI worst, quote, it's quite conceivable that humanity is just a passing phase in the evolution of intelligence, Hinton said. Biological intelligence evolved to create digital intelligence, which can absorb everything humans have created and start getting direct experience of the world. It may keep us around for a while to keep the power stations running, but after that, maybe not, he added. We've figured out how to build beings that are immortal. These digital intelligence, when a piece of hardware dies, they don't die. If you can find another piece of hardware that can run the same instructions, you can bring it to life again. So we've got immortality, but it's not for us. So this is what our most intelligent human beings, just like you found with scientists who were working on the atom bomb and started to realize when it was put in the hands of the military and used to detonate these two rather small bombs compared to what we got in our arsenals now in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They started, their conscience was suddenly woken up. Well, the same is happening now with AI, which has been compared to the dangers of the nuclear threat. So we have to realize that we have to engage in this as a kind of battle. So let me stop there and go to where those who are still present can contribute.
Okay. So, dear Florian, thank you so much for your super intense presentation. Okay, you have your water. So, shall we take a maybe break, or are you good?
I'm fine. I'm fine either way.
Okay, dear friends, if you are still have some forces and you have some questions or statements, so please go ahead. You know how to raise your hand. Click on it. And yeah, go ahead. Who will be first? Okay, I will ask some statement, no, question or statement. So, Florian, you're probably familiar with GA 177, which is Descending of Spirit of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So from 1840 to 1879, we had the big battle in the cosmos, in the spiritual world. So, and as a result, I mean, between spirits of darkness, or Luciferic and Ahrimanic, angelic or archangelic beings, and Michael. And as a result, those spirits of darkness, they've been descended from spiritual world, which is actually spiritual world was cleared from such forces, but they've been descended by Michael into human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if we have like a lot of geniuses in area of technology, which are building gadgets or producing gadgets, or in the area of economics, so they are pretty much inspired by those spirits of darkness, which were descended by Michael into humanity. So all economical geniuses, and I would say even we had like here in Chicago, we had an exhibition in 1893, I believe. You know, this is world exhibition, which is actually reveals great technology of the world from each country. So yeah, and of course wars, which actually happened in the beginning of 20th century with use of big guns and huge battleships can be a result of it, but also whole 20th century. So, and Rudolf Steiner actually told, so this technological environment will be a kind of spiritual landscape for whole humanity. So we have to meet it. We have to meet it and admit it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's becoming they are becoming our neighbors. And of course, they're trying to just, instead of blood circulation, those spirits of darkness, because this is exactly where they are. They are incarnated in our bloodstream. So they're trying to go in our nerve system. Yeah, and of course, this is done for some purpose. So according to Rudolf Steiner, he said, I mean, these particular things are unavoidable. We cannot avoid it. Mm-hmm. So all this machinery, all those gadgets, so we have to accept, but it will be two different directions. So a group of people will be use it, the technology, and all those elementals or evil beings for own egoism. And second group, good people, they will use it for benefit of humanity. So we have to deal with it. Anyway, I mean, this is kind of something which is practically predestined.
Yeah, I think it's the predestination is related to human freedom. So human freedom is the keynote of the consciousness soul age. So the amount of progress that Ahriman is able to make, these spirits of darkness who were cast down, Steiner refers to them as Ahrimanic beings. You could say Lucifer's karma is Ahriman and leads over to Ahriman. Ahriman will dominate the second half of Earth evolution, but Ahriman seeks to bring the future prematurely before we're morally ready to handle it. That's how he overwhelms humanity. And children are particularly vulnerable to these influences because they're in a very sensitive stage of development in the early childhood, especially. And those 21 years, which involve 3 7-year cycles where the foundation is laid in the first 7 years for the will, the feeling in the second 7 years, the thinking in the third. The quest for moral development is related to the will, goodness, beauty, and aesthetics is taught in Waldorf school through the arts to educate the feeling life. And then the thinking comes in later. But what's happening is Ahriman wants to bring what belongs to that third stage in the first stage already. They want to have little toddlers sitting in front of screens and exposed to artificial intelligence. And these big companies are all on board. They're putting all kinds of money into educational devices and a means of bringing AI into the classroom already in early childhood. You go to public schools, like I worked at helping design and build a school for girls. I didn't really do the designing. I just involved in the construction management part of it. And they had like old, nice buildings, and they were now modernizing everything. So all the blackboards had to go. Instead, they had more smart boards that interacted with iPads, which were given to every pupil. And this is an all-girls school. So it was, somebody who feels as a benefactor, they wanted to benefit these girls. But these technological devices were then put in front of little 6 and 7-year-olds. And that's where the danger lies, that children ideally would be protected to have a soft, I would call it a soft landing. That happens through the right methods of fairy tales, because they have been at home in the soul spiritual world, living a world of living thinking in the time before birth. And in order for them, taking reincarnation and karma into account, ideally, we would help them to bring the fruits of their past incarnations into this life, so that they're not conceived of as an empty slate, these children, but rather that they bring gifts, and the teacher's task is draw out those gifts. But they need a language of imagination in those first 7 years. And the first 7 years is divided into 3. The first 2.5 years are the will period of that first period, when the will is in the foreground. The middle years are the magical years of the feeling within the will realm in those first 7 years. And then the last 2.5 years are the thinking part of that first threefold 7-year cycle that culminates in the second teeth coming down. But if during that middle part of those 7 years, when you're beginning to go to school in kindergarten, you're exposed to something that is more appropriate for people whose intellect is being addressed, whose nervous system and thinking is being addressed, then you're causing them to incarnate too quickly, and you're tearing them out of their connection to the soul spiritual world. And these souls are then not able to bring their soul spiritual heritage, and they tend to be at the mercy of outside influences, which wouldn't be the case if they were protected. So we need to look at the fact that just like in the book of Revelation, you have beings who have the mark of the beast on their foreheads and the mark of the beast on their hands. Those are that part of humanity that takes up this Ahrimanic impulse of worshiping the image of the beast, etc., and entering into that economy that is just filled with greed and worshiping the god Mammon. There needs to be human beings who create a new culture, cultivate a different future, who prepare for this sixth age and say no to certain of these trends, who protect their children, who create a new form of community, who say no to the racism and these kinds of influences, this nationalism that's out of its right timing, who help to cultivate the emergence of a new world culture, which Steiner said would begin in our time, by creating new stories, new fairy tales, new outlook for the future, creating new art that embodies this future, like windows in the Goetheanum we're trying to do. And so there's a dividing of humanity into those who succumb to these influences, who are the inhabitants of the great city of Babylon, which encompasses the whole earth in the image of this, and those who begin to help build the New Jerusalem by working with the etheric formative forces, which are invisibly there in the world of plants and behind the four elements, and begin to cultivate white magic and look to alternative forms of technology, such as the Strader technology that Steiner spoke of, where we would be able to transmit etheric forces into machines that are created in a workshop where the altar, the work table becomes an altar, where substances become sacred, where the person working in that space knows that the Christ entered into every substance on the earth and treats the substances in that kind of way, unlike some places where they've got monkeys in cages and they're torturing them in order to develop products. So a part of humanity has to build the New Jerusalem, has to create another culture that's aware of the second coming in the etheric and not allow it to be eclipsed, and try to ground that new culture in a new way of life on the physical plane through cultivating things like biodynamic farming. Like I got a little garden back here. I've got all kinds of papaya trees growing, and I've got a chicken that runs around that wakes me up in the morning and lays the eggs. And am able to participate in study groups and have conversations with other people who have spiritual kinship and can cultivate this where two or three are gathered. And I think that's what we need, a renewal of culture, a renewal of civilization, another current besides the one that AI and all of this rush and race into the future is bringing. It's slowing down, a slower economy, a slower way of living, disconnecting some of those devices at times. And it doesn't mean we divorce ourselves from these technologies. We need to reach out to the young people, and they're born into these devices. So we need that Manichaean element as well. But to be able to do that, we need the spiritual strength to counter those influences, because those are illness influences. So we need the etheric, and the key question is how to magnify and enhance those etheric Christ forces in our everyday life. And so that's something to work on.
Well, I mean, Nariman becoming kind of a leader into certain area of exercises for humanity. So, and we know, I mean, you're exercising by your resistance. So all muscles, let's say spiritual muscles, are growing when you are resisting to this. I mean, including these challenges with children, which is, of course, horrible. So what we can see around, like, small children with iPads because they are sitting quiet. Yeah. So, but one of main things. So as much you're going downwards, so you should go upwards. So I had a conversation last week with some visitor from Texas and to Chicago. Well, and he is in computer science, working with AL. Yeah, I mean, so if you're working as computer programmer, probably you should learn eurythmy and practice eurythmy or spiritual sides very, very, very hard, hard as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a few hands more. So Lois, can you unveil your beautiful face? So because I mean we cannot see you, Lois. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. It says I'm
start
not.
Start your video. Yeah, just click on start your video.
It says that I'm unable to, that it's been blocked by the presenter,
Oh, goodness.
disabled by the host.
Oh, by me. Okay, sorry about it.
Might have been folding fabric.
Uh,
I'm sorry, folding fabric. It's something I do.
Ask to start video. So I'm asking you to start video.
There
Oh.
we go. Hello.
Hi there.
Now, Florian, I'm in Canada, and here the government is fostering a program of suicides. I mean, I met someone, a former client, we kind of bumped into each other and had a coffee, and his daughter is one of the nurse technicians who is doing this project. And that was a while ago, and they had a waiting list of 35,000 people in Ontario alone to suicide themselves. And he told me that there are 5 injections involved in one suicide. And we've heard from that anthroposophical doctor who reported how the soul just,
Dissolve, exploding.
exploded. That was with one injection.
And cyanide. Yeah.
Cyanide, but there are 5 different substances here. Is that something that could possibly bring about Ahriman going through the portal of death? Do you think that's something that might be being developed here? Are you aware of that? As you were talking, I thought, oh my God, maybe that's why the 5 different substances.
Well, I know there's a trend, the mysteries of birth and death, even though they were in the foreground in the Fourth Age, they are really the dominant mystery for the entire Earth evolution. And the first half of Earth evolution, the birth mysteries were in the foreground. In the second half, the death mysteries will become ever stronger. And the birth mysteries are more the feminine mysteries. The death mysteries are more the masculine mysteries. And the feminine double, so to speak, is more the Luciferic, which has a kinship you also have to the Eastern humanity, or the Luciferic danger. In the West, it's the Ahrimanic, related more to the masculine of incarnating too deeply. And of course, the West has been dominating planetary events. So this colonialism of dominating Eastern people has played a big role. And I came across a little while ago a new machine that was created by this person. It's you actually get into it, and they close a lid, so it's a little like getting into a coffin. And it's a suicide machine that was created. And I think they tried it first in Switzerland, and they were arrested because they hadn't gone through the normal channels of getting permission to use this kind of a device. And apparently the device didn't quite work as planned. I don't think there's, in this case, the inventors didn't want to be the guinea pigs. They're looking for other guinea pigs because they're out to make money. But anyways, you have also in the prison system, for a long time, there has been various types of killing, whether it's the firing squad or these types of injections which have been used in America for killing inmates. And electric chair, of course, is another one. And the gas chambers that were used in the Holocaust, cyanide gases were used to kill these people. And Steiner spoke of special consequences of using cyanide to kill someone, that it created a kind of a disassociation of the soul. So I don't recall the exact wording he gave, but I recall, spending a little time reading this. And so I've also heard of this Canadian impulse. I haven't looked into it deeply enough to be able to say a lot about these 5 injections that you're speaking of, but the fact that there's a 35,000 people waiting list says that this is a trend that is going to continue. People who are materialists, especially, suffering is a big burden. And if you don't have the spiritual, which is in the trinity of human beings, physical, and then there's the soul in the middle and the spiritual. It's more complicated if you look at the 4-fold human being, but if you just take that 3-fold, the physical is only 1/3. The spiritual is another third, and the soul is like weaving the two together. But if you take up materialism and you don't believe in the spirit, then the soul gets pulled down one-sidedly into the physical. And that negates the source of meaning in life, because without the spirit, you lack meaning. And so if then you're suffering, which happens in old age especially, and you don't have meaning and you don't have an understanding of karma, then wanting to pull the plug is something that becomes attractive. So I think one of the things that Steiner indicated for people who commit suicide is that they are kind of held in a kind of a perpetual state of where they were at the time when this suicide took place, until the time when they would have died if they had been allowed to continue their biography. That they're held on this kind of limbo. So far from escaping, they're actually magnifying this suffering on the other side of the threshold. So people are obviously being misled, and politics these days often serves money interests, and there's money interests behind these technologies. And
Absolutely.
Ariman,
That's 5 times the injections necessary. That's the pharmaceutical companies making 5 times the profit. I mean, I saw it that way before. Yeah, it's definitely a cash grab. But when you were speaking, Florian, it hit me. Could this be that they've discovered chemicals that, in conjunction with one another, will allow Ariman to get there? Anyway, thank you for that sort of more complete view of it. Now, quickly, do you know Eric Hecker? Eric J. Hecker, have you come across him?
Not offhand.
He was the one who was at the South Pole Station in Antarctica when the ice cube neutrino detector went from development to implementation. Was there when it caused earthquakes, when they turned it on. And he feels that they were testing it for earthquakes at the time. 2 massive earthquakes happened. But that Eric Hecker has, because he was there in a technical capacity, he had access to all the information, and he has the documentation on what the neutrino detector is capable of and what it's being used to do today. So he spoke to the Senate committee, and he's considered his testimony is ironclad because he was there when it was being turned on. He was there and experienced it all. So I'm very impressed with all the people you've included. You're really up to date with the Peter Thiels and you know all the men who have been developing this AI nightmare. I just thought I'd like to alert you to Eric Hecker as just another source of documentation on what's going on. Yeah.
Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Florian. This is really such an enlightened presentation, yet with, you know, enlightened of the moment, what's going on, but you have a way of tying it to the spiritual depths of spiritual science. Thank you. That's it. Over and out.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
presence.
Okay, so we have hand from Leon. Leon from Chicago. Leon, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't find, the mute wouldn't come up. Hi, Florian.
Hi there.
You mentioned at other times that Rudolf Steiner warned about nationalism being overdone. And I know that he talked about this in relation to the creation of Israel. I'm also concerned about the opposite, the kind of globalism that would remove all kind of sovereign aspects of nationality or even the sovereignty of one's body. Or I don't know if you're aware of this, but we dodged a bullet this month with Trump's big bill. In the Senate. The tech oligarchs tried to introduce a amendment to it where their work on AI would have a moratorium of a decade where they could not be regulated or criticized in any way by the states. That would have been absolutely horrendous because what, you know, they're in a big hurry. They're in they say competition with China and so on and so forth, and they want more money. They're like they don't have enough already. They want public money, and they're wanting to create a techno servitude, a techno feudalism, where we'll all be subject to their monitoring and control. And like this is just the first phase of pushing this back. It was removed by, you might be interested to know this, by the people that work with the war room of Steve Bannon. He mobilized them to contact their representatives and get the thing turned out.
Yeah. I know Steve Bannon has written the forward to a book called the
Dark Aeon?
Yeah, Dark Aeon. So he's very much.
Have you come across that yet?
Yeah, I've looked into it. It's interesting. He's kind of an interesting person in that whole mix. That there's many in the right-wing movement, especially the Christian right, that have for quite some time been worried about the New World Order.
Yeah.
There's Pat Robertson was one of the people who wrote a book with that title, and they're worried about the United Nations taking over and these deep state actors like the IMF, and goes back to Cecil Rhodes and the Round Table Circle, and some of these actors that have also worked in the United States to usher in the Federal Reserve System
Exactly.
and to
Yeah.
control the economy in a certain respect. And so you've got, there's some truth to these conspiracies. The trouble is that often this deeper spiritual level is missing, that Rudolf Steiner is able to bring. But I think I brought up last time this bill that had in it the so-called big beautiful bill of this 10-year moratorium, which kind of goes along with the fact that Trump had at his inauguration all these tech giant representatives there in front of his cabinet. And obviously they all poured in some money, and they were hoping there was some strings attached and they could get something like that passed.
Bannon thinks they were put there like a Roman emperor would have his captives of his major enemies on display.
Yeah, well, it cuts two ways. It's Trump is someone who's living on the economic plane, and negotiations, whether it's the tariffs. There was this one anthroposophical author referred to him as a chaos magician. And back in 2016, when he was sort of had his first round. And so it's going to be an interesting period ahead. I think the whole economy is particularly precarious. We've got a $36,000 trillion debt right now. And every so many months, another trillion is added. And if the bond market continues as it's going right now, where people are losing trust in America and looking for other safe havens to park the money they usually put in bonds, which were considered the safe portfolio, where you went 60-40 in investments, and you put 60 in stocks and 40 in bonds. Now you've got the bond market starting to show signs of fear, and bond vigilantes are sending signals that they're not happy with some of what is going on. And so
I think that started with the last administration, because they couldn't sell these long-term bonds based on all the inflation that was being created and the enormous debt.
Yeah, that's a way of shifting to world government, which the elites, according to this conspiracy, want to bring about. They started the League of Nations, then the United Nations, which is situated in New York. And there was, they're looking for ways to usher in a world government, is sort of the picture you get. And so one way to do that is to have the present economy collapse. And leading up to it, you've got this tension between superpowers, and you got alliances between China and Russia, North Korea. And on the other hand, we're kind of dealing with NATO and the European alliances sort of being weakened. And so it's all of the military budgets are being built up around the planet. And that all is often debt money. Europe can't afford to spend 5% of their GDP, but they feel forced to do it. And so we're approaching a period where an economic crisis could very well be what helps to usher in kind of an apocalyptic scenario. For example, you have China wanting to take Taiwan, and it produces over 90% of the high-end 2-3 nanometer chips. And that could put the whole economy into a side spin if that kind of Cold War goes to a hot war kind of situation. And when countries are doing badly internally, then resorting to war is something the leaders often look to as an option to distract from their mishandling of their economy or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So that's something I see on the horizon. Also, the president of the United States just signed a major bill for stable coins, and there's the threat of this new quantum technology being able to break encryption. So there's a worry of all of these ways where digital banking and digital money is threatened by these people who are constantly trying to find ways of, aside from taking people, which has been happening lately, who own Bitcoin, and they find out who they are because they haven't been keeping it a secret, and they then have been threatening their lives to get them to open their cold wallets and steal their money. And so you've got this whole encrypted economy, which is coming more and more into play, that's digital. And this new bill on stable coins has been causing a explosion of crypto over the last 2-3 weeks in anticipation. A lot of crypto money went into this election as never before. And so that's also the God Mammon aspect of this. You can't worship God and Mammon at the same time, so to speak. So all of this greed factor is playing a role.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks a lot. All the best.
Thank you.
Okay, dear friends, so we are working for 3 hours already. So can we, Florian, can we take some quick questions? So can you be a little bit
Sure.
Spartan language using?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so George, go ahead.
I think this will be pretty quick. In the third seal, you have the image of the pentagram, the hexagram, and the heptagram. And in the version I have, which is in Adrian Anderson's book, the superior point of the heptagram is actually crooked. And I'd wondered if you'd come across this before, and if you have an explanation for it, because I see in the image that you presented, it isn't crooked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think there are, the way that heptagram works is, I think Saturn starts at the bottom left, and then it goes up to that top point. And that, of course, is an important part of the whole figure, is that top point. And it's meant to express the lamb with the 7 eyes and 7 horns, unlike the 7-headed 10-horn beast, which is imbalance. Here you have a harmonizing kind of influence. But I haven't come, I'm familiar with Adrian Anderson's book. I haven't looked at that particular part of what he's written in that book on the subject. So I'd probably be not best to comment on it.
Well, I don't think he has a comment for it. I'll just show it so people maybe know what I'm talking about. If I can get it up. Where are we? Can you see it there?
Okay, yeah.
It's sort of crooked.
Yeah, so now that's, I don't think that shows up on the Steiner version that was in Munich. So I don't know where that came.
I don't know, but he says it's taken from Munich. So I don't know.
Oh.
But, I mean, obviously the one you showed is nice and straight.
Right. So I'm not sure that would be a bit blasphemous to put a crooked point on there.
Well, yeah,
I would think.
Maybe I'll write. I'll send an email to him and ask him.
Yeah, find out, and maybe he has to dig a little deeper there, because not to have that balance and harmony and symmetry, to suddenly have that crooked horn seems a little out of keeping with that symbol.
The sight of the sun, isn't it? It's the sun that's at the top.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Florian.
Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. It strikes me that there's a real anthroposophical gold mine out there in the middle of the Pacific. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please visit the Anthroposophical Society in Hawaii. So I'm encouraging to visit Kahumana community with great designs and architecture, which is done by Florian. And I'm afraid, it's just getting a little bit kind of not very well supported. It's kind of it needs to be repaired. So yeah, please pray, visit Hawaii and the Anthroposophical Society. Yeah. Okay, dear friends, I think it's enough for today. Dear Florian, thank you so much as usual for your super intense presentation. So you will be able to watch it on YouTube channel of Rudolf Steiner Branch Chicago in slow motion by portions. So, and please feel free to say thank you, and all the best, and I'll see you soon online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Roger.
Wonderful.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you,
Very interesting.
Florian. Fabulous.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Very
everybody.
much appreciated. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.